I am so conservative.
Rationalized in my head. These are things I read in
And
the
I'm going to talk about Willow Creek.
Okay.
Willow Creek, a few years back, had
remembered at the time when Will Rogers said, I don't belong to any organized religion. I'm a Baptist.
Yeah.
I am so conservative.
If you didn't jump to conclusions, you might not get any exercise. I am so conservative. And welcome to the Unknown Webcast. We have indeed reached a time when people are really more afraid of words than sticks and stones. That's weird, isn't it? Trigger warnings have become more necessary for those viewers who have a fear of hearing an idea which may lead to exposure to a potentially uncomfortable or challenging thought. This is that warning. I really am so conservative I can't turn left even when I'm driving. This includes being theologically conservative. I want to know and believe what is true and am willing to change my beliefs. So, if you are easily offended, this is not a safe space for you. Today is March 3rd, 2021, and this is broadcast number 230. Today, Carl Teichrib and his trustworthy sidekick, Audrey, joins us to report on dialing for dollars in Davos. My name is Don Bino, and I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast, and our senior researcher, co-host, and Time Magazine's 2006 Person of the Year, Ron Hensel, who will introduce the sponsors of today's webcast. And here is Ronnie Baby.
Not to mention your trusty sidekick, right, Don? Okay, greetings from sunny Florida, where the palm trees came out, saw their shadows, and now we have 12 more months of summer. Yes, I really am the Time Magazine 2006 Person of the Year, and here is the proof right there. How can you deny it? Of course, I was a little bit late for the picture, so I had to supply it myself. And I am no longer the person in control of the information age. I turned that over to Zuckerberg, Dempsey, and Bezos. Our sponsors for this week's edition of the Unknown Webcast includes Assimilation Ministries, where implanted in the body is not just a slogan. Assimilation Ministries, and Carbona Grande Resort and Spas, the investment opportunity of the new climate world order. And of course, our new, but every week now, legal disclaimer. Our guest, or maybe I should put an S in parentheses next to the word guest now, because we don't usually have two at a time, but our guests on today's webcast, insert names here, Audrey and Carl, have no connection whatsoever to any of the satirical content of the Unknown Webcast, hereafter known as the Webcast, although we probably will not mention it again. The satirical content includes any and all commercials, end credits, puns, smart remarks, or anything else that might fall under the definition of satire. In the meantime, Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. bears no liability for or responsibility for anyone's opinions regarding this satirical content. This straight from our legal counsel at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. So if you enjoy this webcast or it really annoys you and you want to inflict it on somebody else to ensure continued access to this program, please go to midwestoutreach.org, click the yellow donate button, and contribute as you feel led. And don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite video channels. And all the good ones feature us until Amazon's web servers kick us off. So, which could happen any minute now.
Any minute, exactly.
The screen could go blank, and yeah.
So, you know what? We probably should do one more thing. We want to talk about Carl's book. Carl's not a bookie, but he does write books.
He makes book.
he makes book. Yeah, exactly.
Book squirrel.
And in the description down below, I'm getting to point that out.
Very good. Yeah.
In the description, yeah, Ron. Okay.
But you're pointing at Carl when you do that. And I'm pointing at Audrey. We really want to be okay.
Well, how about if I point at the book, Game of Gods, and Carl's website is now back up and going, forcingchange.org, and so you could go over there, or you could go to our description and click on the link to his book there, and we'll get a couple of shekels from that as well.
Oh,
yeah, so
I prefer centenarii myself.
Well, see how that's how you are. That's how you roll. So why do we have Carl and Audrey? Because two smart people are better than no smart people, I suppose.
Somebody's got to keep after Carl.
Keep after Carl, exactly. All right, our title is Dialing for Dollars in Davos, and some are going to go, what does that mean even? So we're going to tell you what it means. They had a big meeting in January. What was the meeting, and what is Davos? I mean, is it a restaurant? Is it a book? Is it a country club? Where's Davos? Where was everybody hanging out?
Audrey, can I hit that one?
Absolutely.
Okay. Davos is an annual event that takes place in the Swiss community of Davos, and it has been an ongoing event, part of the organization of the World Economic Forum. It's typically their annual event. It's held during the last week of January, and it is a gathering of global financiers, the CEOs of your largest corporations, heads of state, governors of central banks. The list is basically a very long list of who is who in the world. The organization...
Is there a Trump hotel in Davos?
I don't know. It started in the early 1970s as a kind of a networking concept, and it really blossomed from there to become kind of the premier gathering point in January for those who are involved in every realm of economics, business, and politics. And for a little while, they actually had an interfaith component attached to it a number of years ago. It's gone now, but they did have an interfaith component for a short time. They're playing around with it. So it's usually a closed-door event. You have to get invited to attend or be able to contribute a sizable sum of money in the hopes that you might get picked to go to Davos. But because of COVID, they didn't have the physical event that, it didn't take place in the real world. So it all took place in the virtual.
Not virtuous, but virtual.
No, not virtuous. And Audrey and I, she's in Alberta, I'm in Manitoba. We both had to be up at 12 o'clock in the morning because it started at 8 o'clock European Central Time. And so it was 12 hours per day of monitoring the Davos agenda as world leaders were discussing the Great Reset.
That's almost as long as an impeachment hearing. Wow.
Almost
12 hours.
Almost as important.
You can see on the map there. It's just a stone's throw away from Liechtenstein. So if you need a party or something, just leave Davos and go to Liechtenstein. They have lots of parties there. So I really don't know that, but it's anyways. So you watched this for 12 hours, and that must have really been fascinating, or not? Which one was it?
Oh, it depended. I mean, it was 12 hours per day for 5 days. It went on. Oh, yeah, it was a 5-day event. So Audrey and I were going back and forth texting and messaging going, how's your coffee supply? Because, I mean, there was not much sleep, maybe 2 to 3 hours per day kind of thing as we were live monitoring. And then in our Facebook feeds, both hers and mine, we were reporting in real time and putting our comments in, and the page just grew. And I mean, page after page after page after page of comments and observations.
They're going to release a transcript on this. You didn't have to do that.
No, thank goodness. I had 171 total pages when I put it in a PDF of material that pulled together. And I know Audrey had piles and piles and piles.
And it was all benevolent stuff about how we're going to, make life easier for everybody by getting out of their way and let people have freedom, right? That's right.
just get along and everyone will be
Yeah,
happy.
Yeah, and just less government interference. That's what it was all about, right? Champion. Yeah, I have yodeled, and I really I kind of model my yodeling after Leanne Rimes singing, and Eddie Arnold. He was good too, but so.
My mother loved that animal. Before we get too sidetracked there, Davos was organized, guided by globalists, right?
What?
Yes.
It's like the opposite of what I just said. I mean,
I have often, well, see, I missed what you said because my microphone was off. Why was I going there? Oh, yeah, globalists. Because, globalists are always trying to do what globalists do, bring everything under a one world government, one world monetary system. They've been working this for, I don't know, Carl, 400 years or so. The original ones aren't still here, but, they're kind of carrying the banner on for others. And so this is about the global reset, right?
Correct.
Okay. So what does that mean for the average person? Because there's conspiracy theories that are just not true, and then there's conspiracy theories of things that are actually conspiracies.
When they do a global reset, aren't we going to lose all of our computer files when that happens? No? What is this global reset thing?
The head of Microsoft is involved with it, so that could be the case.
That's true.
All right.
Please explain.
So
Audrey, you want to nail that one?
What's a global reset?
Well, I always like to let Klaus tell us what it is for
Klaus Barbie?
Klaus Schwab, the originator of the World Economic Forum.
Oh, okay.
He hosts these every year. So how he says it is, instead of traditional capitalism, the world should adopt more socialist policies such as wealth taxes, additional regulations, and massive Green New Deal-like government programs. The country from the United States to China must participate, and every industry from oil and gas to tech must be transformed. All aspects of our societies and economies must be revamped, from education to social contracts and working conditions. The changes we have already seen in response to COVID-19 prove that a reset of our economic and social foundations is possible.
Did he say something about China in there? I forget. I actually thought I heard the word China.
Participate.
What?
China must participate.
China must participate. Yeah, I don't think I like Klaus very much. I just get this feeling, this vibe.
And he's not Santa either. So.
Yeah. So he this is strange. Why does he just? It's like he's going along, and he's describing this kind of like, sounds like a total reworking. That's not the word I'm looking for. Overhaul. That's the word I'm looking for. Like a complete overhaul of both economy and government. And it sounds pretty Marxist to me, which has been tried, I don't know, several hundred times and has never worked. So now, since all we've ever had is failure on a regional and local scale, now we want to try to have a failure on a global scale, right? Why does he just suddenly, in the middle of this, insert China? What was China thinking of not participating at the time? And he was just trying.
A lot of concerns with China. They recognize that they're kind of like they play by their own rule books. And all throughout the event, actually, people were concerned that China is becoming the new superpower over the States. And so they want, like they refer back to COVID-19 when it first happened, how they had no transparency on where it came from, any data, any stats, anything. And so they're really concerned about that, to the point where they actually sent the WHO into China to finally make a report of what actually happened.
Has anyone on this in this Davos thing? Has anyone ever studied the history of China there?
Well, what was interesting with China's involvement is, and Audrey is right, there's a lot of concern with China. At the same time, there was this admiration of China and what China is doing in terms of its digital development, creating more or less like a digital great leap forward.
So does anybody realize that China is essentially copying what Japan did when Japan opened up to the West and had in 1856, was it? Commodore Perry of the United States sailed into Tokyo Bay and basically said, "You're going to open your country to the West." And like 60 or 70 years later, they defeated Russia in a naval war. Mm-hmm. That's like, okay. So what China has done is basically not as impressive as what Japan did, but it's pretty impressive. Okay. But China also has the longest history of any nation on earth. It goes back, 6,000 years or something. And it is the most historically xenophobic nation of any nation on earth. China's different. Are you sure you want them to play at our playground? I'm not sure they're going to play nice. What do you think?
Well, the thing that was striking with China's involvement, we had the president of China as one of the speakers. Was that the first day, Audrey? I think it was the first day. First day. Okay. And Klaus Schwab's introduced him with great fanfare. And when it was all done, Klaus Schwab's was basically congratulating China for showing us the way forward for what we could become, what we could be doing, because the president of China was going on about the importance of coming together as one world. And then what was very telling is at a certain point in his speech, he shifts from this accolades of globalism and accolades of one world and coming together as, in one human family. All of a sudden it shifts. And the question becomes, and it's unspoken, but the question becomes, who takes us there? How do we get there? And then it's China.
Surely we can't do it ourselves.
China, yes, China will become the new model, the new kind of the one that pulls the levers of global governance. China will be, and it was always China will.
Because they show there it is. And they show such respect for the individual over there, right? And they really care about their neighbors, aren't they? Showing that by the stuff they're doing in the South China Sea, building those islands. Surely those islands are simply meant to be stepping stones to the Philippines, so they can walk over them and handshake their hands. We're your neighbors. These are the Chinese in your neighborhood. Well, anyways,
but the geopolitical side is fascinating. I mean, it's a huge component of what was being wrestled with. I think, though, the one thing that strikes much closer to home was the combination of social justice, climate change, and bringing that together in the concept of a stakeholder capitalism.
Well,
And I mean, honestly, that's what we're seeing take place at this point, as companies and corporations are embracing this idea that social justice now becomes a framework. I know, Audrey.
I think the Uyghur Chinese pretty much know about social justice over there.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah. I
well,
think
and the global aspect is also, it's important to us too. In fact, one of our sponsors is concerned about climate change and.
You want that one first? Okay. I'm sorry. keep talking, Don.
Well, yeah. So one of our sponsors has developed something to aid in climate change as we anticipate that. Are you ready, Ron, to do something with that?
I actually was queued up for the one that I. Okay. Well, I'm ready now, Don. Okay. Yeah.
Go for it, baby.
It's a big problem, isn't it? I hear that it's going to take away something like 1,000th of 1% of our wealth by the year 2050, and yet it will cost like several times our wealth just to do anything about it. So yeah, it's when you see stuff like this, when you see images like this, well, what do you think of? I think of my backyard personally, but when you see it, I'm in Florida though. When you see it, what do you think? What do you think of, vacation fun, relaxation, time away with the family? Well, here are two words you should be thinking. Cha-ching. Because now, any day now, the Arctic beaches of Canada, Alaska, Greenland, and Northern Europe will all look like this, making them the investment opportunity of a lifetime. Work will be starting soon on our new chain of Carbona Grande resorts and spas. All you need to do is contact Oxgore Industries today for a free investment prospectus at 1-800-CLIMATE so that you can invest in Carbona Grande resorts and spas, the investment opportunity of the new climate world order. Al Gore's making his money, carbon credits and everything. You can make yours. I see in somewhere in Baffin Bay, way up there in the territories, place without a name in Canada. Just we
Baffin Bay and beyond, right?
It's the territories. It's where the Inuits live. They're going to be the richest people on Earth. They're going to have I'm going to be under 9 feet of water here. They're going to be raking it in. So anyway,
now we're going to have an article on this next week that was done by Carl and Audrey on our blog. But in the meantime, they met, and it sounds like Klaus is not unlike Robert Mueller, who was Assistant Secretary of the UN for 40 years.
I didn't know that. That definitely qualified him to write reports about things.
Different Robert Mueller.
Oh.
Yeah. In fact, he's the one who reinstituted the Parliament of the World's Religions because he really was moving for a one world government. He realized you can't really have a one world government without a one world religion. Yeah. And so the Parliament was restarted in 1993 with that view. We got to talk to him for a while. He was unhappy with our discussion, but you know me, I didn't really care. So,
how did the Muslim representatives there feel about this one world religion?
That's interesting. We're going to sidetrack 1 minute because I need to tell a story. We went up and spent time in their reception area with the Muslims and talking with them. And you have to imagine this event, Ron. You haven't been there. They, Audrey and Carl have both been there. They have Wiccans and pagans and Muslims and Hindus, and they're all gathered in one place. And so we went up to talk with the Muslim contingent, and Joy sat down on the couch with the wife of the leader there, and she looked at her. She said to Joy, said to her, "I know what the Wiccans are doing and the pagans are doing, but what are you and I doing here? I mean, Islam doesn't believe in Wicca, right?" And so she said, I moved to Naperville, Illinois, and the lady next door to me, because we didn't have a place for the men to pray, so I would have them every Friday morning to come and pray, and I would set out the rugs and stuff like that. And I was going to go home to visit, and I didn't really know what to do. I was fretting about this, and my neighbor, a Christian lady, came over and offered to open my house every Friday while I was gone. And I thought, maybe if this Christian lady can have peace with me, others can too. So we came to the Parliament to try to find a place to bring about peace in the world because the Hindus are killing my family who are Muslims in their country. Right?
But as far as joining together into one religion, were they?
Well, that year, it was interesting because they had their global ethic, which really stated it quite that way, that we're looking for a one world religion. They had so much feedback that they had to modify the statement to say, no, we want to value all traditions equally.
Yeah.
Right? So what does that look like? Now, does that fit into this Davos at all?
Yeah, it kind of does, in the sense that you could ask the question, why are there hundreds and hundreds of organizations, corporations, specifically corporate partners with the World Economic Forum, something like 2,000 economic partners with the WEF? why are they enmeshed with what seems to be at odds with them in terms of their economic thinking? You have so many different economic, political worldviews coming together at the World Economic Forum, just as you have so many religious worldviews coming together at the Parliament of World Religions. What's going on? Well, and I think this is important for people to understand. Within the new climate of global thinking, you keep your regional, cultural, political, your religious identities. In fact, we have more now than we've ever had before, but you all come together under a common cause. You come together under a global consensus and develop a framework where you all can work together and hold hands.
And how long? Now, this is a new development, or is this? This hasn't been you're talking about? Of course, now we're not really on the Parliament of World Religions. Now we're on Davos, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But
they're all connected.
Theme.
That's what's important. What's important is they are all actually connected, and
Right.
so they're moving in sort of the same direction.
And so, when does the Parliament of World Religions meet again? And does it meet in Florida?
I don't think they set a date. I don't think they set. They usually meet every 3 to 5 years, so we're waiting to find out when the next date.
I'm not sure I want them
and
here, but
location is.
it'd be more likely for me to visit if they are. We have, of course, Disney World here. We've got some real
This is
reasons.
very much like that, though.
And everything's open here. So if we still have coronavirus, if we still have COVID, we can definitely have 2 or 3 parliaments of world religion. So there in the
Audrey
beginning,
and Carl, what if we're to say what are like the top 5 points that they're working at, and how does that affect you and I in Canada and the United States, for example?
Well, for me, one of the biggest things that I walked away with was the human governance end of it. So the social justice aspect within the boardroom. And that's what stakeholder capitalism is, which Carl was saying before, is you're bringing the social justice aspect into the boardroom. And things like I think his name is Darren Walker. He's with the Ford Foundation. Anyways, he would say things about if a company doesn't have diversity in the boardroom, what kind of company are they and who do they represent? And so they have basically business now under stakeholder capitalism runs on a metric called ESG, which is environment, social, and governance. And they use that as a framework to monitor every company to see if, so let's say, I'll say CocaCola because they're in the headlines right now. So Coca-Cola company, if they follow the ESG metrics, then me as an investor, if I have the same values as them, now I'm going to heavily invest with Coca-Cola. But let's say Pepsi doesn't have the ESG values and the framework that I adhere to. Now I literally can go and cancel culture them. We are literally encouraged to write them a letter and say, I will no longer do business with you. That was strongly encouraged there.
So what did Coke do to get in the news? I'm not keeping up, I guess.
Well, Coca-Cola is in the news because now they're pushing their diversity training, and somebody within that was taking the diversity training actually kind of whistleblowed what they were learning. And basically what they were learning was a program, I forget by who, but basically it was to be less white, how to be less white. So don't be arrogant.
I knew a guy named Les White. He had a friend named Bo Brown. I'm not making this up. There was
they shared a cubicle, didn't they? Les White and Bo Brown.
There were guys by that name about 20 years ago, and the guy named Mo Brown. His name was Mo White, and he was black. I'm not kidding. You can't make this up. So I found environmental, social, and corporate governance. It has a Wikipedia page. And I like the way they use the word sustainability, as if anything involved with this is sustainable. It's like
Exactly.
It's like if we use the word sustainable, maybe then it'll just kind of like rub off and it'll become sustainable.
Carl and Audrey, are these just euphemisms to make you feel better about what they're doing. Sustainable actually means give us more power and we will make sure to take care of you, maybe.
Sustainable means you're going to run out of money trying to do it. That's what it means.
That is what it means, exactly. That's why it's a
Well, it's all
euphemism.
about lingo, right? They have to use the right phraseology in the words to make you feel like you're part of a team so that they can draw you in to go, yeah, I want to be a part of this. They play on your emotions and your just your thinking, you know.
Yeah.
They play on that to manipulate you to make it seem like you're part of a team to then go along with what they're really doing, which is always present under the radar, under everything they're talking. You know that it's there. You know, and when you learn, like we were at the Parliament of the World Religions, it was there too. You know, once you know what they're talking about, you know, their phraseology and what it actually means, their doublespeak, you know exactly what they're putting out there to you. And it's not good in a lot of cases.
Give us an example. What was the theme of the Parliament, and maybe what's the theme of Davos that would say, okay, here's the word they're using, but here's what it actually means?
Well, say racism, you know,
Okay.
Get into a hot topic. You know, both of them were about racism.
By the way, just for anybody watching, we're all racists here. I just want you to know that. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
We're aware of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I jump in real quick on that?
Yeah.
The Parliament of World Religions was the power of inclusion and love.
Right.
And so the language all the way through was how we are all being loving by demonstrating how pluralistic we really all are. Except, of course, and Audrey, Don, myself, we saw it over and over again. It's not very loving towards those who disagree with their agenda. In fact,
Right.
To be inclusive and to be loving is exclusive to those who disagree with their worldview. On the Davos side, the Davos agenda had had seven, don't know why four came in my head, had seven main themes that they explored, and all of them had, as Audrey was describing, buzz phrase worthiness. The first one was saving the planet. And so many of the presentations were about how we would save the planet. And it was more or less on climate change issues and biodiversity. And then fair economics sounds wonderful. Who doesn't want fairer economics? And that was, again, stakeholder capitalism and how we would integrate social justice, including the idea of a new social contract. Really important. Into what Audrey was talking about earlier, the CEO of CocaCola was on that panel, talking about how now we have to ensure that even our supply chain, as for larger companies, that we will force our supply chains to accept more or less the concepts of social justice and a new social contract. One of the other themes was technology for good, how we're going to digitize everything. Everything is a number and everything will become a number, essentially, specifically through blockchain technologies, so that we can create a new climate, kind of a new climate model, a new economic model that'll be involved in saving the planet. A better business, healthy futures, beyond geopolitics. All of these were each the themes for the various talking points that were developed over the course of that event. It sounds wonderful on the surface until you start scratching it a little bit more, and it doesn't take long, and you're going, oh my, okay, well, oh, that's what you're meaning. So, we've got people like the Secretary General of the United Nations saying we need a global economy, a single global economy, adhering to international law. We have the president of China at this event saying his things. We have the president well, we had actually, I think, 20-some different heads of state, including President Modi from India. Benjamin Netanyahu was one of the speakers, but I think his talk kind of triggered a few people because Netanyahu went
Really?
yeah, he did, because probably, but Netanyahu was speaking about how he cut through all the red tape and went straight for, having a conversation with him and the leaders of vaccine companies, Pfizer, and specifically, I think he was talking about. Cut through the red tape so he could ensure that his country would receive the vaccinations. And then after that, what was the language we heard over and over again? Vaccine nationalism. Those of you engaging in vaccine nationalism.
Oh, yeah, vaccine nationalism. I just want to clarify something I said earlier. We're not racists. Okay, let's move on.
But Audrey's point about language is so important. If we were to take and drag the average person into these events, be it the Parliament of World Religions, be it Davos, be it even Burning Man, be it whatever, be it to a Wiccan conference, whatever, all of them have their own language, their own phraseology, their own understanding.
Can we go back to China just for a minute here? And it connects directly to what you're saying. I had a friend who studied China quite a bit. We had a lot of political disagreements between us, like the time I walked in the room and he was wearing a Che Guevara t-shirt. There was a big disagreement. It was the color. It was a really bad color.
Well, anyways, yeah, it was a bad color, right?
It didn't work with his complexion. Well, anyways, he told me that in the early days before the Communist Revolution, and I think even before it might have been during the Japanese, no, it was before the Japanese invasion. The Chinese were arguing about which way to go. And I mean, they had just thrown off the colonialism under Sun Yat-sen. And now the question was, are we going to go, the party lines are beginning to form between a nationalist and socialist route to take. And somebody asked Sun Yat-sen what he thought. I think he was an old man at this time. And he said, the communists have the rhetoric. The communists have the rhetoric to win. Now, I don't know if that meant he thought the communists were the right ones to win or not. It also helps to understand that China has, I forget how many languages, but they only have one set of characters, so that you can understand. If you don't speak Mandarin, but you speak some other language, if you see the signs, you can read them, even though you don't speak the same language, because they use the same characters for the same words. So rhetoric is extremely important, especially written rhetoric in Chinese culture. And they have the rhetoric. In other words, they know how to manipulate words. Rhetoric is, by definition, persuasive speech. We hear the phrase empty rhetoric, which, of course, that's the kind of persuasive speech that really is false. It's meaningless, really. It doesn't deliver what it promises. But rhetoric itself is important if you want to get people to, if you want people to be won over to your side, you need to know something about rhetoric. So what right now, it does appear, with respect to the masses in the West, that once again, the far left has the rhetoric. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They know how to manipulate words. They know how to do what Trump did. So this is what makes Trump such a threat. He can slap a label on somebody and they're doomed. It's like, Scott Adams had a series of videos on this.
It's been that way for a long time. Liberals have been better marketers for really bad ideas, unfortunately. Yeah. Conservatives have great ideas, but they are terrible at marketing.
Because it takes thought.
Yeah, well, they take instead of being pro-abortion, they decided to become pro-choice. Now that sounds like a really good idea. Who could be opposed to choice? So that's what we're seeing with Davos, right? They're doing the same kind of a thing. They're taking bad ideas, but they're casing them in really sort of compelling words. The rhetoric, as Ron was talking about. So what are the seven that you were talking about, laying out? The seven themes?
Right. The seven themes. First one was saving the planet, fair economics, technology for good, society and the future of work, better business, healthy futures, and then beyond geopolitics. But then really you could take that and boil it down into a few different four different main that's where the four came from. That's right. Four main talking points: COVID and climate, the existential threats of COVID and climate, and how this requires that we work together. This is what forces us to come together. Then the next one was social justice. We need a world that is inclusive for all. That was the mantra over and over again. That's where James Quincy, CEO of CocaCola, came into the conversation. Lots of talk of we need a living new wage. We need living communities, the creation of a global social fund or a global social protection fund. And then the third one was stakeholder capitalism, because that's where economics meets social justice, meets governance. But then the fourth one, and this is so important, how do you manage? Because this requires management, and that is through digitization.
Now, this is interesting. Just one example of verbal manipulation, the word stakeholder. I'm looking at the definitions in the dictionary. To see if they correspond to my understanding of what, like the version of the word the version of the definition I'm most familiar with is one who has a stake in an enterprise. They're showing the first definition in two dictionaries that I just checked as the person entrusted with the stakes of betters. Of course, this is like if you're at a poker game, the stakeholder is the one you let him hold the money while you gamble. But I think most people are more familiar with the second definition, one who has a stake in the enterprise, which it does involve the idea of risk there. Because you've put some money, you've invested something. That's why you have a stake. But how are they defining stakeholder?
Right.
What do they mean by it?
Humans.
Oh, everybody.
Humans.
So even if you've not invented squat, even if you invested squat, even if you have been on the dole all your life, taking money and not investing.
Okay, so Audrey, what do you mean all humans are stakeholders? What does that look like?
Well, they want to take it out of the hands of shareholders, basically, and put it back into the hands of employees. And
when was it ever in their hands?
Consumers.
When was it in the hands of employees? I mean, they're making it sound like.
In order to put it back in the hands of employees, that had to be in the hands of the employees to begin with, and that's just not happened.
So in other words, it's a Marxist idea. The laborers, the workers take over the means of production. Yeah.
Well, yeah. That's why you have all the diversity training in the social justice. That's why it's so important, because they want it to seem like, they're taking it out of because they're trying to get rid of the economics, right? The money end of it. And so they want it to make it look like now it's fair for employees. So the employees have more of a say almost than a shareholder.
So let me ask you a question. They're trying to take the money out of it. So if you take the money out of it, all of the really wealthy globalists, does that mean they're going to be reduced to living at the same level as?
You think, right? But
why is Carl laughing at that one?
Well, they've got to stay in their positions of power so they can guide us with their infinite wisdom.
Right. And it's Audrey's nailing a really important point here. It becomes something that in our country, Canada, in fact, in Audrey's province, specifically Alberta, the idea of social license then comes into play. If you as an industry follow the dictates of the culture, let's say specifically for Alberta, the petroleum industry, well, if you engage in all the right activities to help reduce climate emission or carbon emissions, yada, 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 pay carbon taxes, do all of this, slash your production, all of this, then by appeasing to those special interest groups, you as a corporation now are going to be granted social license.
Social license.
Is that like social credit?
It was not necessarily. Now it gives you you should now have the moral uprightness to demonstrate that you are actually a productive global citizen. And it destroyed Alberta energy sector. It's destroyed the energy sector in Western Canada.
Why they get arrested for being social without a license? What happened?
No, it's not. It's not the issue of arrest. It's the issue of social pressure. Now, all of a sudden, where does funding come into play? Are you meeting certain standards? You have the government will step in and say, "Hey, well, you haven't done your due diligence.
Right. So you have a new social morality now that we've abandoned biblical morality, which looks like this, whatever it is that we have dictated, and you will be canceled if you don't have it. Now,
Biden canceled the Keystone Pipeline day one.
Exactly.
That was social license. That's social license.
Social license and all the other one. Now, if you want to resist that, by the way, there is a way that they can overcome that. One of our sponsors talks about how to deal with those who don't really want to participate.
Well, yeah, let's just deal with the questions that they present to us. Our church is getting a little too individualistic for your tastes. Do you often wish it wasn't so hard to fit in with new Christian friends you meet? Would you rather be part of a collective than a uniquely gifted member of a fellowship? Well, now you can find freedom from the hassles of having your own personal identity with Assimilation Ministries. At Assimilation Ministries, our pastoral staff is ready to relieve you of the burden of being yourself. There's no need to choose a new identity. We choose it for you. All our assimilations come with our trans lifetime guarantee. Satisfaction is irrelevant. Assimilation Ministries, where implanted in the body is not just a slogan. You should check it out. So, it's kind of sort of related to what we're talking about. What was I going to say? What you just said here completely destroys my stereotype that Western Canadians are more intelligent than Eastern Canadians. I had a roommate from Calgary for a year, and ever since I've said A at the end of most of my sentences, he also slept with the window open in the coldest Chicago winter up to that point that I ever lived in. Thankfully, we didn't have really good circulation, so I was on the top bunk, so he had to deal with it. It's amazing when we look up north, and I mean, I'm not kidding. I really did think that Western Canadians were more down to earth, but when you get to the state capitals, I bet you that's not the case, right?
Let's go back to Davos, which is in
or the provincial capitals.
Yeah. So dialing for dollars, a big part of this was monetary, correct? The global reset, are they trying to do that like this year, in 2 years, in 5 years? And how will it affect, let's say you have, a retirement in stock investments or whatever, school teachers' retirement, some big retirement account. What happens to that?
Good question. It's an ongoing process. This isn't something that's happening tomorrow. It's an
very
ongoing
slow reset. It's like pressing the reset button very slowly, right? Yeah.
But it's ongoing. It has been ongoing, and how fast it moves, it'll probably depend on what happens in terms of COVID economic recovery, and how we begin to switch over to, let's say, to central bank digital dollars, which is something being very openly discussed and was openly discussed at the Davos conference. But I guess the bottom line is it's a reflection, a economic reflection of a worldview that already exists and primarily exists within the academic leftist policy circles, and what they have been aiming towards for a long, long time. I mean, your dig on Western Canadians is kind of, it's interesting, and it's actually quite relevant to this. Is it doesn't seem to matter where you live. You will have powers external to your region who will now force you to conform. And so for Western Canadians, we are forced to conform to federal Eastern worldview ideas. Your nation is no different. I'm watching what's happening for, let's say for farmers in the U.S. Midwest. I have rancher friends in California. They are constantly battling.
Yeah.
Well, they're constantly battling that conformity.
The farther west you go, the more wacky it gets here. But it's what you just said. No matter where you live, I would take that in a slightly different direction. No matter where you live, the corporations and government offices are populated with people who are educated by leftists.
Yes.
There was the universities have the least amount of diverse thinking of any institutions in North America. There's
Right.
the least diversity of thought. And and so they live in their own little echo chambers, and very few of them have studied history to any. They only study interpretations of history. They don't read primary sources to the extent that they should. And so my question then becomes: you're talking about Davos, and they're planning all these great things. Does it ever come up that does the question of the possibility of big social upheaval because of the mismanagement of the pace of change? Is that ever addressed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
So
Audrey, you're on.
Audrey.
Audrey, you're on.
They do bring that up, but they bring it up like they don't outright say it. It's always under the surface. But they do talk in terms of, they'll politely phrase it this way: if you don't adhere basically to their worldviews, then you will be left behind. And so for us to not be left behind, it's on us to reskill ourselves in, for example, in the tech industry, because they do say that the tech industry, AI, will take over and jobs will be lost.
They're just totally clueless. What I'm talking about here is if the pace of change is not properly managed, and if everybody is not included, if everybody doesn't have a voice, the social upheaval the kind of social upheaval I'm talking about will make what happened at the White House on January 6th look like a Girl Scout meeting.
Yeah, and they talked about that.
Oh, okay.
They were concerned about that kind of upheaval, and they actually blamed it on social media and fake news.
Right.
And they talked about having legislation
in
place that they can actually arrest alternative news sources because they're spreading disinformation and all that, right? So if you don't adhere, you're left behind. That's their basic message.
So just double down.
Human follow that.
So just double down on the echo chamber principle.
Right. So you have free speech, but it has to be approved free speech. Any non-approved free speech will get you canceled.
Yeah. I think the one person who did push back in Audrey and I both watched it was when the Minister of Foreign Affairs for Brazil, when he was making his comments, trying to find his name real quick here in my document. Yes, Minister of Foreign Affairs Ernesto Araújo. He openly said in his presentation that he was not in favor. He says, I'm not a great fan of the Great Reset. And primarily, though, he said, while I respect concepts like sustainable development, the one thing missing in this entire conversation is freedom and democracy, and primarily freedom and the concept of liberty and economic openness, how that is consistently missing in these conversations. And he went on to talk about what his concern was a form of a rising techno-totalitarianism. And so he actually was pushing back against it. I was going, yeah, good for you. I'm surprised he even let you on the panel. But he openly was critical of this, saying freedom is absent from your conversation.
This is something that Francis Schaeffer predicted would happen before he died. He talked about how there was talk, this is 40 years ago, people were talking about having a group of technocrats who were responsible to make sure everything, that they were the ones to be the overseers, the benevolent, they wouldn't say this, but benevolent dictators as a group. But who oversees the overseers? This isn't exactly the way Schaeffer put it. That's the idea, though. Who is watching these people who are supposedly minding the store technocratically so that we turn out to be the kind of society they want us to be?
Yeah, we're following, and at the end of our article, and we'll be putting, I believe, Don, you're putting the article up later on. At the end of the article, we say,
be up for next week, yeah.
Yeah, at the end of the article, we say the reset dangles before us a global public-private partnership that follows the mystic path of social feelings, because that's what it is, the holy writ of consensus politics, and the prophets and priests of technology and finance. You know, maybe the arguments that the Brazil's foreign minister were making are worth considering. This isn't about freedom. This is about managed harmony.
That's right.
In your vision, whatever that vision
as they
may be.
define it.
Bingo.
Define it, right? So your book, The Game of Gods, which we recommend again, kind of does all this stuff before this Davos thing even occurred. But what we're seeing, what we're witnessing, and you and I have talked about this on our webcast before, is simply a rehash of Genesis and the Tower of Babel. It is a competition between the religion of man versus the relationship with God that he provides for us. Right? Isn't that all they're doing? Substituting?
Absolutely. It has a messianic impulse. It has a salvation message. Salvation for mankind comes by saving the planet. We heard that at the Parliament. We heard that over and over again.
Right.
Golly, Audrey and I have heard that when we've been at Burning Man. We've heard it in so many different ways, shapes, and forms. This is no different. We're saving the planet. That's why the first theme with the Davos agenda was literally entitled Saving the Planet, because we become our own saviors. It really becomes now, for the Christian, it should force us to ask the question, who ultimately do we trust? Do we trust man, or do we trust God? It should be a question that is now should be plain before us, because man is saying trust us.
Right. In a big political way, a global way.
Right.
It isn't even just intimated at. This is big. Okay, we're eliminating your view of morality. We have a new, improved morality that is social justice. It is equity. It is stakeholder. It is, and there are great words, but they mean something really different than you and I would normally understand them to mean.
How close do you think they are to realizing maybe at least some of their goals?
They talk about wanting to achieve this all by 2030 and 2025, and then at the very latest 2050. So the Sustainable Development Goals are all tied in with this as well, and that's 2030. They did say in a different thing that we were on with the UN that the next 10 years will be the actionable years to achieve Agenda 2030. And they seriously mean it. Like, they mean business with it.
Well, what's this question here from Richard Neal?
So, Richard Neal, maybe a paranoid question. Is this movement of Christian leaders, especially SBC promoting CRT, directly connected to the WEF push for social justice? WEF. The World Economic Forum. Are they at all connected?
I don't know. I haven't been following what's been going on with the Southern Baptist Convention, so I'm not.
Well,
I mean, that's more your
on. Yes, yeah. That they are battling whether they're going to remain together or split over critical race theory.
I think they should split myself.
Yeah. So I would suggest they are not directly related, but you have the same influences in critical race theory that you have in the World Economic Forum, which is social Marxism, essentially.
Or cultural. Now,
cultural Marxism.
I have a question about, I mean, this is the first time I've heard the phrase Agenda 2030. I found a page at the United Nations website, Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Is the United Nations really in the driver's seat on this, or is it?
It's one of your global partners.
So they're one of them.
Absolutely.
Who are the other?
Approximately 2,000 corporations, the World Health Organization, a lot of central banks, a lot of governors of central banks, some of the largest hedge funds.
But who would you say is
Pepsi.
Who would you say is really the coordinator?
Klaus Schwab's is the coordinator within that platform. But what you have to understand is this is
you mean human or spiritual?
Yeah, human or spiritual. Good question. This is really, I think people miss something with this. This is an ecosystem. Okay? This is an ecosystem. This is not just one movement, one event, one group. It's an ecosystem built around worldviews. I'm glad you brought up Agenda 2030. Ironically, maybe it's not, I had Agenda 21 sitting on the official copy, sitting on my desk.
Agenda 21. Well, what, and just coincidentally is 2021. Is that what 21 refers to?
No, Agenda 21 was put together back in 1992 at the Rio Earth Summit. It's a framework convention on how countries are supposed to reshape their own internal politics around environmental and sustainable development issues. So,
what does the 21 refer to? The number
21st century.
21st century. Okay.
Yep. But back to your point about how does this affect, or is it really, the question is it affecting now? So in my country, Audrey's country, carbon credits. The fact that our deputy prime minister and minister of finance is on the board of the World Economic Forum, on the steering committee of the World Economic Forum. All of a sudden, I'm watching my national politics become shaped by the worldview and the ideas and the concepts through the World Economic Forum. If you want to know how your country is going to be shaped, ask John Kerry.
Yeah, he's the guy who's.
He is one of the speakers at the World Economic Forum, and he is Biden's climate ambassador, and he was there speaking about how we're going to reshape America to fit these goals and these models. So this is, it's ongoing. That's the point. It's ongoing. It's the ecosystem. The ecosystem is now influencing the broader culture.
How do climate credits function in Canada?
They're voluntary at this point.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I think we have voluntary ones down here too.
Yeah, but we do pay climate taxes. We pay carbon taxes. Pardon me. We do pay carbon taxes. Yeah, which suck.
Now, Ron has an appointment he has to be at. So we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to let him walk us out of here, and if you two are okay with us, we're going to hang around for another 10 minutes or so.
I might ask you a couple of questions, but no. Well, I'll do this first. How's that?
Okay.
And then you guys can.
And then you can walk out at your leisure. Then go.
Yeah. Okay. Well, our resident cult leader profiler is Neil before me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Our culinary services are provided by Chef Ham and Cheese. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is Just In Case. Our Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon and D Opposer. Our Mormon archives manager is Polly Gummas. Our liberal denominations bureau chief is Lucy Goosey. Our transgender issues coverage comes from Ben Hur. Our special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys, Ode to Humanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Joe Leg Pulling. Our technical assistance comes through Murky Research. Our legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham & Howe. Our grievance resolution director is Giovanna Pisami. Our director of privacy assurance is Wiretapping. Our original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are solely responsible for this content, but you will never be able to prove that in a court of law. Not even.
So this is kind of our after the show dialogue. Yeah, after the show for those who want to
post show.
So you can ask your question quick, because then I want to deal with this question of
which cities are.
Pardon?
I'm asking Carl and Audrey, where do each of them live in Canada? Or do you both live in the same city?
Go ahead, Audrey.
No, I live in Alberta.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I'm in Manitoba.
Manitoba. Well,
yep.
That's a whole province. You live in the whole province? You require that whole...
All of it. Just spread myself right out.
It takes them like a week to cut the grass.
Not to say, is what you're saying. Okay.
I'm in a small community, very, very small community, about 200 kilometers, mostly west of Winnipeg.
Near Yellowknife? Oh, no, I'm just kidding. All right.
And he has to import his well water. That's kind of a problem.
Yeah, it sucks.
Import the well water. Okay. Well, just take streams from the mountains. Okay. Thank you guys for coming. We really appreciate it.
All right. So back to you guys. I kind of want to go revisit this idea of Richard Neal said it's strange that globalists, papacy, SPC are heading in the same direction. And it would be strange, except I would suggest the problem is cultural Marxism. That would be the guiding principle, in my opinion. That's what's going on with the WEF, I think. That's what's going on in our school systems here in America. That's what critical race theory is all about. The SBC has bought into some of the critical race theory, maybe a lot of the critical race theory. It happens that the current pope is black liberation, or not black, but liberation theology, which is theological Marxism, is all it is. So what you're dealing with is Marxism, in my opinion, versus the God of Scripture.
Yeah. But, it's not just simply classical Marxism, Don. Because classical Marxism would...
Cultural. I said cultural.
Yes, that's right, cultural. Because it would it abhors private property, and it abhors Christianity. Here, you can retain your private property, but your private property and the management... For now, but that management of that private property now needs to be geared to a bigger goal, a bigger consensus. I would more couch it around the idea of a type of a pagan techno-Marxism. How about we just call it what it is? Collectivism.
Collectivism. Okay.
Yeah. Regardless of whether it's National Socialism or it's international socialism, it's collectivism.
Okay. So it's collectivism, and they're working out in different ways around the world right now, but it's all going to get to that point of collectivism, and it'll be some kind of uniformity at some point.
Has to be, I would think, or at least, diversity. How does that saying go? Unity and diversity.
Unity and diversity. Well, yeah, it used to be unity and diversity, but that won't. It'll be unity in unity. Not in diversity. So how would a Christian respond to this? Because do we work at creating a second civilization, a second economy? Do we revert back to the way first century Christians lived and try to impact those around us and potentially change culture again, if it goes on that long? See, depending on which theological spectrum you're on, if you're Reformed, then the world has to be getting better and better, which means we have to impact culture that way. If you're dispensational and believe in a rapture, you're going to be out of here, but I don't think that means just give up and walk away from the problem. We still should be lights in a dark world, yes?
Absolutely. I think one of the things we do is we network, and Audrey's been very involved in trying to build networks of Christians.
Okay. Tell me about that. How does that work, Audrey?
Well, basically, the premise is, we are told to be aware of the season that we're in, and that we're going to go through birth pains and that. And we can argue if we're in the end times or not. And I mean, who knows, right? But Jesus did say that the birth pains are going to happen, but never told us how long. So we could be at the beginning, we could be in the middle, who knows, right? But through all that, you're going to still need the fellowship and the people around you that are going to have your backs, right? People that you can at least have a friendly face and lift you up and edify you. And, those that believe in Christian values still, and I don't know, I'll say reality, so I encourage that if you can find people in your area of like mind, and that's a cliche phrase, but of like mind, build your networks while you still can, because you're going to need people with skills to help you, move through this time. Now, it's not saying, we'll bring up the vaccine issue. It doesn't mean that all those who don't take the vaccine band together. It's, that's your choice, but still believe in values, right? And that's what's under attack right now. I mean, living in Canada, I'll just bring this up. Living in Canada, we are already seeing the arrest of pastors for holding church. And they're saying it's because they're not adhering to the COVID mandates, the rules. But he outright wrote an article saying that he is standing up to the Christian values of gathering and having church, and went on and talked about Romans and things like that. But, so he is making a stand. And they arrested him, and so he's going to go to trial, they believe, at the end of May. And one of his conditions to get out on bail was that you can get out on bail as long as you don't open your doors again. And he said, no way. So we're already seeing that within Canada. And so if you have a network around you, now you can support the pastor, you can support each other, you can still hold fellowship, you can, and that's what with my ministry called remnantonlinefellowship.org, that is the heart and core of why we exist. And then through that as well, we introduce people to content providers not afraid to talk about what's going on in the world today through a biblical viewpoint, which, Dawn, you have agreed to be a content provider. So you will soon be up on our website and in our Facebook group and all that.
So now, how are you going to safeguard that so that Amazon doesn't say, okay, get them off of our server, or whoever it is that you're with?
Well, that's why the urgency is now. Create those networks while you still can. And that's what I mean, while you still can. Because when we're censored off of social media, I mean, most people have friends they consider friends just on Facebook, for example, on social media. But have you really met in person? Do you have their phone numbers? Do you have their emails?
Oh, okay. So get more personal contact.
Yes.
What about something like DTube? Have you looked into that? Which is we try to go to
different platforms, right? So different kinds of platforms, but eventually all of those will be, domino effect, be taken down as well. I mean, at Davos, they were seriously talking about shutting these people down, shutting these sites down. That we need uniform consensus for factual, in quotations, information and education and that. And they really brought up what happened on January 6th. They used that as the catalyst and as the excuse for why we need to have legislation.
Why don't they go back to August?
Yeah.
I mean, it was only $2 billion burned down and looted in this country over that period of time. But, that was peaceful protesting versus what happened. I don't even want to go there.
Yeah. But it is, and living in Canada, we are literally starting to see the effects of this worldview being pushed and forced on us. And if we don't adhere, like I said, they politely say, well, then you'll be left behind. And what that will look like, how you will be left behind, they don't care.
Yeah.
Right. Because they're not really inclusive. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah. The question always arises, what can we do? The last day of the Davos agenda, I put on my Facebook, my post, 5 steps to help kind of wrestle through this. I think the first thing is understand your own worldview. You need to take the time to understand your own worldview, but also take the time to understand their worldview. And then begin to see this as for what it is, a clash of worldviews. And I write, while ignorance may seem bliss, it's still ignorant. It's ultimately unhelpful. And then second, you need to inform yourself and then inform your circle of influence without resorting to the hyperbole that comes with it. But because the facts are sensational enough as it is.
Right.
And then do this with honesty, do this with respect, become a trusted source, and then read up and study in all kinds of subject areas, applying wisdom and biblical truth. Apply that biblical lens. And then thirdly, encourage your pastors to stick with the truth of Scripture. Right. Because churches it's not just that churches aren't immune from these pressures. In fact, oftentimes, churches and seminaries become supporters and promoters of what really is essentially a political religion, that together we can build the kingdom of heaven on earth. And then fourthly, don't be afraid of the world. Concerned? Absolutely. But don't let this drive you into a condition of fear. And I write this way, don't become a slave to the slaves, because they're just slaves too. Don't become a slave to the system. Don't let the fear of man overshadow what's really important, which is really the fear of God. And then finally, see all this for what it really is, which is an alternative humanistic salvation message or a pagan salvation message. And then with all those things in mind, be the ambassador for Christ right where you are. If you are engaged in the world of business, that's where you're operating. If you're engaged in politics as a Christian, we need to support you and to help you as you are now at the front lines of battling this worldview in the realm of political discourse. And on it goes. Do this to your children, your grandchildren. My goodness, the importance of prayer comes into play. So in other words, we're not supposed to become passive. but we're not aggressive in the sense that now we're going, rise up. No, we rise up in terms of we understand what is truthful, and we speak truth with grace and with salt.
Right. I recall someone said something like to be wise as serpents and gentle as doves.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So Richard Neal, and this will be our last question, and then we'll have to quit for the day. We'll have to come back and do this in a little more organized fashion. But now we've got kind of the rough outline of here's what's going on, here's what to look for. It's not this year, but it is coming. It'll be over probably the next 8 to 10 years in some gradual path toward a one world global system, a one world economic system, etc. Richard Neal asked, do we think that we're going to have underground churches in the West like we see in totalitarian states today?
It's already happening.
I think so.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's already happening.
I do too. Evangelical churches here in the States are becoming more marginalized as progressivism takes over. And if you raise an issue like, as you know, we're really involved with exposing the Enneagram and contemplative prayer, which is basically Hinduism that's now infiltrated the church. Contemplative prayer is. The Enneagram is occultism and New Ageism that has infiltrated the church. And as we raise it, they look at us like we're wacko. Until we start laying it out and saying, okay, here's where this came from, here's where this came from, here's where this came from. And then they look at you blankly and they go, yes, but it's such a good tool. If we just eliminate this stuff, we can use it for the Christian faith. And I say, okay, would you use astrology that way? I mean, it's just no different. So that's on one end. In the progressive movement, you have in the church using critical race theory as, quote, a tool. It's not a tool. It's not a tool. It is a way to establish racism and make sure that all whites, as primarily white males, are the lowest on a totem pole. So, and if you raise that, of course, for white fragility says you're just doing that because you're fragile. So, anyway, Mrs. Bahar Hadari, we're glad you were here. Richard Neal, it's a pleasure as always. And Benjamin, we are glad you made it, even though you were late. You'll be scolded later for that. All right, can you two hang on for a minute? We're going to end this broadcast and see you all next week.